Hello and welcome to BTE Media's In Conversation With series. This morning, I'm delighted to welcome Martin Berliner, who is Chief Exec of Maccabi GB and a fellow long-term Chelsea supporter. Good morning and welcome, Martin.
Good morning.
So, Martin, for the viewers that might not be aware, can you just bring to life Maccabi GB and what it is and who it's for?
So actually, I've just added another title. So I'm also Chief Executive of Maccabi Europe. So to give it some context, Maccabi World Union is an NGO, not-for-profit, that was established in Israel nearly 100 years ago. Actually, it was established in Europe.
Sure.
And the Maccabi world is separated into 5 chunks. We are part of Maccabi Europe. There is South America, South Africa and Australasia.
Yep.
And there are 38 countries in Europe, and Maccabi Great Britain is part of that. And the aim of the movement really is Jewish continuity through sport. So by engaging people in sport activity, a community that plays together, stays together. And that, bearing in mind the assimilation of Jewish people, particularly in this country, where we've lost half of the population of Jewish people in this country since the war, if they lost as in assimilated, it's become more and more important. So it's about Jewish life, it's about physical health and well-being, which we've extended into, because there's not very many successful Jewish sports people. On the amateur scene, it's slightly different. We have affiliates of sports leagues and associations such as the football leagues that have been around a long time. So we have a Masters League for over 35s. It goes up to 70, I think, some of the guys playing. We have the Men's League, with 30-odd teams, 18 to 35. And we have junior leagues, which is slightly different today with children, about 500 kids in one place on a Sunday where they all play sort of small-sized sports. So it's a provider of sport, health and well-being products with the aim of creating Jewish or sustaining Jewish life.
Thank you. And we were just discussing before we went live, if you like, that you've been CEO for 20 years. Is that right?
Yeah. So just over 20 years. Yeah.
Okay. And is the charity sector and this part of it something that you felt you'd always wanted to do and get involved in? How did it come about?
No. No idea it existed, really.
Right.
I worked for 20 years at Selfridges in London.
Sorry, Martin, can I just ask you to speak a bit more into the mic, because I'm losing you.
I was a buyer for Selfridges in London for 20 years.
Oh, right.
Around home products. I travelled the world, had a fantastic career there. And then it sort of came to an end. And for a couple of years, I was in the States doing various things. And then my son got chosen to go to play for Maccabi Great Britain in a sports event in America.
Okay.
He was a goalkeeper. And so we got a pack that was actually a sponsorship pack. And like anybody, I was looking at who I could interact with to try and raise sponsorship.
Sure.
And I actually wrote to a paper that you know well, called the Jewish News, whose editor at the time wrote back, surprisingly. I actually was quite surprised, and said, "How many of you are there? This drives me mad. Come and see me."
Yeah.
So I went to see him, thinking I might try and get some sponsorship. And he explained that this charity has no real strategy around fundraising. And they get all these letters. Every time some kid gets selected for something, the Jewish News gets all these letters from parents who want them to give some money. So I then turned my attention to the charity, and I went to the chairman. And I said, I don't really understand this. And he explained that it was a voluntary-led organisation and that really they wanted to professionalise, but never had the money or maybe the vision to do it. But they were ready now to do it. And so, cut a long story short, he sort of offered me the job, but said he had no money. And so I took the job. Yeah. And very fortunately, landed quite a big sponsorship deal very early on. And that's when I started to build the business platform.
Sure.
At that time.
So clearly the organisation is very different now to when you first joined. And obviously over 20 years, you've had to develop it to what it is today. This is quite a big question I'm going to ask you, but how does one go about making those changes?
the honest answer is by luck. A fair amount of. I brought all my grounding at Selfridges. I was a Saturday boy at Selfridges. I happened to be there trying to earn some extra money, and I realised actually there was quite a big infrastructure. And I eventually became a supervisor, and I was sent on the management training program, and so I learned quite a lot about structure. And so really, I looked at this business about how could I develop it. If I had the money, how could I develop it? And so I really wanted to reposition the charity from just being known for sport to move more into the community area. Because I felt there was more value. That was a growing part of the community in terms of people wanting to be together to celebrate being Jewish, but actually not necessarily going to synagogue.
Sure.
And in fact, that is the way the community went. So basically created some good ideas, scaled them in terms of making them bigger events. We now have the 3 largest events in the community every year, well, most years, except this year. Really using my business nous, creativity, and a very good teams of people, some really talented people. I will tell you one anecdote, which I always tell. It's not like the commercial world in this sector. And one of my earliest meetings, was sitting at a round table and somebody was late, and a woman came in 10 minutes late, and she said, "I'm really sorry I'm late, but I had to go and bring the front cross to change something." And that had never happened to me in my entire 20 years.
Wasn't my mother by any chance? She loved changing.
No, to be honest, it became the norm. People turn up when they're ready because they've got other things to do. But that sort of slight irritation becomes something you actually fall in love with because it's the way the community work. And it's very, you would know the word. I don't know what the definition of Hamisher is, but it's got that sort of, there is a family element to it, and I had to adjust my management style and leadership style to fit in with it because my style from Selfridges initially would not have worked.
Sure, and I guess obviously you've achieved quite a lot within those 20 years. When you first started, just give us an estimate. How many people do you think the organisation touched compared to now? So
the model, I've actually got all these numbers in my head, and the reason I've got it is because we actually do this as a presentation to funders quite often, and also to induction staff and trustees. So when I arrived, we had 4 staff who were mainly secretarial, helping to support international games such as the Maccabi, which is a big event for us. We send 400 or 500 people to big games, and we can touch on that later maybe. And the turnover was about 180,000. Today we did have 21 staff, an average turnover of 1.4 million. But in international games periods, it could be up to 3 or 4 million. So hugely different business. And so the membership, so when I started, I was told there were youth clubs all over the country, and that they were the members who were affiliated to Maccabi Great Britain. By the way, it wasn't called Maccabi Great Britain. It was called the Union of Association Maccabi something, for short, Maccabi Union. And I changed the name, so I thought the word union was negative, actually.
Right.
Growing up in the 70s.
But like trading, yeah.
So, I got in the car and I drove around the country, and most of the youth clubs had gone. So we didn't have this membership. So we redirected our attack really to what was the growth areas, Jewish schools. When I went to JFS, there was one school, there was one primary, one secondary. I think there's 38 now across the country. So we directed our work, curriculum, PE, and also you'll talk about later Streetwise, which is an informal educational program, all of that going into schools. So that was very different. And so our reach changed. So today, with all our projects, we touch around 80,000 people a year.
Wow.
So completely different model. That's how we did it.
You must be very proud of what you've achieved during that time. We're going to move on to other topics. I just want to ask you one other question about your sort of 20 years, if you like. And I guess it's going to be a tough one to answer. What's your proudest achievement or even moment during those 20 years?
I think it really is hard to answer one thing. Standing at a fun run community fun run, which started at Haberdashers. I'll tell you an anecdotal story. The first one, somebody from Jewish Care came to our office and he said, look, we was thinking about a run. We'd done something which you knew well, actually, called Community Kickoff at White Hart Lane.
Yeah, I remember it.
And we used a business model of charities paying a fee, and they then got their players to raise money for their charity.
Yeah.
And it actually worked really well. That first event at Spurs, we raised about 25 grand, and actually it worked well. So when this guy said about the run, I said, well, we could use that same model. And so we did our first one at Haberdashers School. It rained like it never rained. It just constantly. We stood there at 6 a.m. that first morning. We weren't sure whether to call it off or not. And we had around 250 runners. And we had volunteers helping us around the course. And I personally put a couple of ladies in a very key position that when the runners come in a particular way, they've got to point them in this direction. Okay? And we started this race, and I was watching at this corner, and the ladies decided that they had something more important to talk about at that moment, which was probably the shopping at Brent Cross. So they took absolutely no notice of the runners, who then went one way, and 5 seconds later, all went the other way. And then we're back again. It was like a cartoon. Yeah. The whole thing was a disaster. And I did what any good leader would. I hid behind a bush and lit a cigarette or something.
We've all been there.
We'll go away. Yeah, we've all been there. So anyway, we got over it. And so when I stand at the fun run now, see 8,000 people.
Amazing.
Not so much even the running or the walking, but the charity fair with 85 different charities. We've raised £2.5 million through that project.
Wow.
It's just that moment, when you look around, you've been there, and it's a lovely summer's day, and you just think, yes, this was all worth it.
And it's now a fixture in the diary as well, isn't it? So people know, exactly when it's happening. Yeah. There are a lot of charities out there, Martin, both inside and obviously outside the Jewish world. There are charities that pull on the heartstrings. And there are charities like yours, which are trying to mobilize people to be active and get involved. And I think along the way, in my previous position at the Jewish News, I probably had these conversations with you. How do you go about how did you go about, because you've done it now, mobilizing people, getting people to donate, going to those senior donors when, you haven't got a film about, unfortunately, a kid who's suffering from a long-term disease, etc. How did you manage to achieve that, or set about?
It's a good question. So the first deal that we did was with the JNF, who were looking to engage young people. So their strategy or their reason for engagement was different, and we had young people. Yeah. They felt they didn't, and that was a big deal.
Right.
So that was sort of the platform. There's two types of giving. There's that sponsorship, corporate, yes, I want my badge on your shirt to go to the international games sponsorship. And then there is pure donor-based giving. Yep. And we didn't have any of that. But we appointed as president a guy called Stanley Cohen, who was a very successful businessman from Birmingham, who met his wife Joy at Maccabi Youth Club 60 years earlier.
Wow.
Now, some people wouldn't see that as a good thing, I'm sure. Could have gone either way, but he did. And so he always had a soft spot for the organisation, and he became president. And the style of giving at that point was very much who you know.
Yeah.
So I would come to you as I know you and say, come on, Dan, I gave you £5 grand last week for charity. And you go, yeah, all right, go on, I'll do it. And there's this exchange of money around the charity sector. So although we don't in that way, you're right, we don't exactly save lives through medicine or anything like that. What there are bigger donors out there who do get it. And also when they stand there on the fun run day, they actually realise the transition of community life is different. And if they don't feed that, then actually assimilation can increase. So that's how it was done. It was done through people that he knew, and then we were able to sustain those. And unfortunately, we've had a few of those very, very wealthy people who have been able to do that.
Yeah, and then I guess you get to you hopefully get to a tipping point where people have seen that other people have got involved, and then they sort of follow that model. You've mentioned partners, you mentioned JNF, and I guess with every charity, the role of partners is really important. Can you just expand upon that a bit more?
So So JNF started, we moved on to UGIA as a core partner. Our biggest single partner is the CST, Community Securities Trust. A really simple thing. We didn't really have an office. We ended up at Shield House in Hendon, where these guys were. And I've got very friendly with their CEO, Richard Benson. And one day he said that they had issues with kids going on buses to Jewish schools were being attacked. The parents were ringing him a lot about anti-Semitism. And he said, it's not our thing, but it is your thing in terms of youth work. And we sort of came up with this project together, which was called Streetwise. And the idea was that we would deal with transitions to junior and senior school, how to look after yourself through the KM type thing, Krav Maga type things, but also just generally about growing up and inspiring confidence in young people, both inside and out. Today, we see 40,000 children a year with that program.
Fantastic.
In every school in the country, Jewish school in the country, and we're the largest deliverer of informal Jewish education in schools. So that from that small acorn, this huge tree has come about. But without some fantastic project managers and staff and people, you couldn't do that. And in fact, we've just added a program called Stand Up 2 years ago, which is very unique. It puts a Jewish facilitator with a Muslim facilitator in the same classroom at the same time, educating about anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim hate. And that has been phenomenally well received. And we saw around 9,000 kids in the first year, and the government are supporting that. And actually, Facebook is supporting that program. And that's quite an interesting one, where social action has interested social media companies. So we've had funding from that.
And thank you. And so what we're really saying is you have to evolve with the times a lot, don't you, I guess? And obviously you have to think of and deliver campaigns that are relevant to that moment.
Yeah, I think just going back to the fun run, I'm not religious.
Yeah.
So going to a synagogue for me was always, the 2 or 3 days a year, my dad would shut me there or whatever, and it wasn't really what I wanted. What's happened is things like the fun run and colour bait, which are not ours, and certain other things, people can be Jewish without going to synagogue, and actually they want to be there with other Jewish people.
Sure.
They don't need to go to synagogue. So evolving what was going on, I think was fundamental, and I'd like to take credit for all of it. As Spike Milligan once said when he got an award, I'm not going to thank anybody because I did it all by myself. But it's not true. I've had some fantastic people that I've worked with who really have got what we wanted to do and have taken us forward. And like any good manager, I've just hung on to their coattails, really.
Yeah. Going to move on to events. You've obviously mentioned some of them, the campaigns and the fun run, and obviously a lot of our audience is from that world. What has been the role of events? I mean, obviously we've spoken about some of them, but I guess you see events as a mainstay of what you do. So
international events, we travel every 4 years. There's something called a Maccabi Games, which is the world Jewish Olympics, basically 10,000 athletes, 80 countries, and we take a team normally between 400 and 500, depending on how many sports. We took, I think, about 24 different sports the last time, and you are responsible for everything. I always say the same thing: from what fillings you put in a smoked salmon bagel to anti-terrorist activity.
Yeah.
And we had, sadly, 7/7 happened on our watch when we were away, and that event management is absolutely huge. And I would say I was always a generalist, never a specialist. And at Selfridges, you always had a multitask and have a lot of vision of lots of things. And being good at nothing, I was sort of good at that. And in effect, that's what international events or delivery of it. And we're only one team.
Yeah.
If you then look at the fun run, we do the whole event. It's very, very different. So there is a lot. We send teams on an annual basis to America. Every other 2 years we send teams to European Games. There is a lot of event management. We've trained and developed staff in event management. When we started and when you started, there wasn't crisis management plans and risk management plans, but we've had to evolve with that, safeguarding children, child protection. You know, my son started playing football, we used to put all 11 kids in the back of the seat, back of the car, and travel to Redbridge, and they were all hanging out the windows. You wouldn't really get away with that today. So things have changed in terms of event management and governance, and I'm sure you've come across it. It's proved to be the most challenging, but yeah, I love it actually.
Yeah. So face to face, because again, a lot of our viewers will be trade show, consumer show organisers, event planners. Face to face, in your opinion, and obviously getting people together is really important for your organisation.
Like everybody, we thought that Zoom was the sort of saviour in the first few months. Actually, why have we bothered with this infrastructure of life that we've created? Well, we all have a very different view 9 months or 8 months down the line. That infrastructure was created for a reason. We need to be interactive with each other. Whilst this is okay, it loses something in translation. And so, we have coped. We've done very well. The team have done brilliantly moving offline online, but you can't beat that contact, social interaction. Sure.
So obviously the last 6 months, you've had to postpone, I guess, a lot of, obviously there's the fun run. I know that it was, and obviously I know you weren't not responsible for the whole games, but the Maccabi moved, correct, to next year. How have you coped as an organisation, as a charity during that time? Because obviously, never mind the loss of funding, but the interaction, how have you coped with it?
Well, I think the biggest issue has not been the lack of funding, it's been the cash flow.
Yeah.
Because we've got no events.
Yeah.
So whereas the Maccabi would have taken place next summer, we would have had £2 million washing through the system.
Right.
The participants start to pay on a basis. Israel then asks for money. We have to pay the deposit. They're paying the hotels. This whole infrastructure, the flights, the different things, booking 400 flights to all get there within 24 hours of each other. We haven't been able, it's been the cash flow that we've really missed.
Yeah.
And most of our donors in year one have continued to give. We have lost some, but we've managed to sort of survive. But the reality is that it's proved to be very difficult. I would say moving, I think we've done what everyone's done. I think we reacted well initially. We even had a fun run online which raised £75,000 and thousands of people took part, running in their own living rooms, gardens and things like that.
Even I did it with my children in the park.
Well, fine. And Yellow Candle, the Holocaust Memorial Yellow Candle that we managed, that we took on 2 years ago, 50,000 was distributed. I don't know how many actually got out there in the end, because they were in schools and places like that. We'll know more, I think, as we go into the cycle this year. But that was something we were able to do. We became Amazon, actually. We were delivering candles door to door, literally dropping candles off, and people emailing us.
Sorry, just speak a bit more into the microphone. Sorry,
we've managed to deliver our programs, but in a very unique way. Sadly, on because it's gone on, the reality is it's going to become more difficult.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, how do you see the future for an organisation that, right in the middle of it is people getting involved, going out, meeting people, and obviously at the moment that's limited. If it carries on for too long, what effect's that going to have for yourself? And I guess you speak to a lot of other chief execs at charities that are in the same position.
We are all in the same position, and sadly, if you can't put on the events indefinitely, then you shed staff. You have a choice. There are some specialist staff that you almost are paying a retainer to, because to go out to market to get them would be really difficult, and I'm sure other people in the industries are doing the same thing. But we've cut our workforce by a third. By the end of the year, it'll be by a third, and we have no choice, and that's a really sad thing to me. We've never had to do that in 21 years. It's a really tough thing to do. And
what government support, if any, has your sector received, or were you directly?
Not the sector, no. The furlough scheme was good. It's coming to an end, and I think sadly, I think we will see the impact of that across all sectors. But no, I don't remember the word charity sector being used.
No.
Did you?
No. So I just wondered if what's the sector or even a community doing to lobby government? If you feel
that's a good question. I don't think we have. Unlike a business, people are not coming through the door, so we've been reliant on our donors. But no, I don't think really as an industry we've really done that. I haven't seen it anywhere.
No. I mean, it's the same with a lot of other industries I speak to. Some people have always lobbied government, so at this time they're getting their voice heard, and others haven't, and they're now trying to do it. But it's definitely a challenge. In terms of how the government have handled the crisis generally, I mean, obviously you're in communications, right? To a certain extent, you've got to speak to your donor base and the people that participate. What's your view on how the government have communicated their messages?
I think, first of all, they would be in an impossible position. I would not want to be in charge of the country during this period. We thought Brexit was complicated. Well,
yeah,
I really wouldn't. I've been purposely not particularly critical of the individuals because I don't know what I could have done or would have done. They must have millions of statistics being thrown at them. They've lost. I think they've lost the support of the public generally because they've been trying to balance the economy with lives, and it's proved to be so complicated. I heard something really, it was not my comment. I heard something on Question Time the other day. There's a leading businessman who said, we started in this together in March and April. We stood on our doorsteps, we clapped together, everybody was one. It was like a wartime effort. And actually now we're fighting each other.
Yeah,
that's really sad, and I think that's the people I know. Most of them are just depressed by the news and aren't even watching the news.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah.
So we need somehow to keep people together.
Yeah, that's a good message. In terms of, let's just moving on to, I mean, obviously Maccabi essentially, has mobilised the community through sport. I know that Maccabi have been heavily involved in the Kick Racism Out of Football initiative. Can you just explain a bit more about that and how you believe that sort of helped, not just for the Jewish community, but overall?
So we weren't involved as a community. I didn't think in the early days of the 2000s. I was quite critical of Kick It Out, and at the time, Piara Power, who was in charge, there was no anti-Semitism on their website. There was no programs. It was very much the black lobby because they had the black players, which helps. We had 1.5 Jewish players in the professional leagues, and even Dean went off to South Africa, so that left Joe, who as Joe Jacobson went on to have a very good career. But there's not many of them to come to the camera and say this is not acceptable. So, and you and I are both Chelsea fans, and sadly, our club is has often been at the centre of anti-Semitic abuse. So I sort of threw myself into it, and I managed to get onto FA committees and involved with Kick It Out and subgroups and different things, and we put it on the agenda. And so that from that point of view, I'm quite pleased that, again, as an achievement, I think not just me, there's guys, it's Dave Richard at CST, Alex Goldberg, and one or two of the others who have really, we have been the voice of the community. The Deal brothers have obviously made films, and that's really helped. I've worked with both of those, and we funded some of that stuff in the past. So it is on the agenda, and I like to think we played a role in that.
Fantastic. And the Black Lives Matter movement has obviously been pushed to the forefront over the last few months. And obviously is heavily involved within sport as well. Do you get involved in issues outside of the community?
Yeah, I think 10 years ago, I think we were very much inwardly facing.
Yeah.
The phone. Okay. I think 10 years ago, we were inwardly facing. And if you'd said to me, "Are you going to do some work on anti-Muslim hate,
Yeah.
black discrimination, etc.?" I would have said no. Today, we have to be outward facing. And so we do have programs with the Muslim community, and we do have programs that are interfaith. In fact, just before I spoke to you, we're working on Mitzvah Day, where we're a partner, and that is sort of a social action that's certainly very much around anti-racism.
Yeah.
So I would say there is no choice today, but you have to share your experiences, because I think we as a Jewish community have had some good experiences. I think although we have thousands of charities, too many in our sector, we've got a lot to teach other communities and about infrastructure. So the CST are trying to teach the Muslim community about how to monitor attacks on Muslims, and they've been doing that with Tell Mama, and that sort of work. I think with the black groups, I don't know a huge amount about them, but I do know that Stand Up are potentially looking at doing more in that area.
Yeah.
It's a sad situation that has not, again, it's sort of come back to the fore. And you've got to look at leadership for that. I think interesting in the States, a sort of right-wing president has created huge unrest in that area. Yeah. And I think here we haven't done enough to help people from Europe to assimilate, and I think that created an anti sort of immigrant feeling, and I think that's unfolded. So it's a bit of a tinderbox at the moment.
Well, yeah, especially at a time of crisis, right, and an economic crisis, which tends to follow. Yeah, that tends to happen. You mentioned leadership, and I want to, on our sort of last section, talk about leadership, because you also mentioned, obviously before, that it's not obviously, you know, if you're growing an organization like you have, you need good people around you. What do you think makes a good leader? And maybe you can give me some examples, even from the world of sport.
Oh, it's tough question. Very sort of individual view.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
I think, look, you know, would you call a sort of leader with no followers? Man out for a walk with his dog. You know, you've got to galvanize belief, trust, respect, and some sort of vision, and that needs to then be reinforced on a regular basis. It needs to become part of your DNA, and obviously if you're successful with that, to build that with others. I've always tried to develop people that have worked for me to be the best that they can be. That's always been my motto for the organization, that we can be the best that we can be. We're not perfect by any means, but we want it to be the best we can be. So I think what's really important in leadership is to try and set an example, to work hard, to work smart, and to try and develop individuals who want to develop. Not everyone does.
Yeah.
People are happy to. And that noise, by the way, is the RAF, who fly over the house every 10 minutes. But you're an RAF base.
You're a protected individual,
No. But,
yeah.
So yeah, that's the leadership for me is about galvanizing people to manage as well themselves. We've had some great success with this young people.
And how do you go? Obviously, we spoke before about the number of campaigns and initiatives that you do. How do you generate ideas in an organisation? How have you gone about it?
Well, I try and crib as much as I can off other people. I think look, in my buying days, I'd watch things on TV and I'd think, oh, wow, you know, if we had something like that. I used to spend a lot of time at trade shows. If you're saying your audience is trade shows, all over the world. Yeah. And you know, you get ideas, you see ideas, and you think, like, you know, what on earth did somebody do that for? Yeah. But I think having as a buyer, I had a sense of what the public wanted. I think I've had that in this role too. Yeah. And that's, you know, in your work as an editor, you had built yourself a gut feeling as to what that front page should be.
Sure.
And actually, I've done the same, but in the fields that I've been. It's something that just told me this is what we should do.
Sure.
The Yellow Candle project came in, and the volunteers were doing it, great volunteers, and they asked us to help them.
Yeah.
And as soon as I saw the product, I just knew we could take it from what was 3,000 upwards. And last year was 50,000.
Amazing. So you have to go with your gut sometimes, don't you?
I do work a lot on that.
Yeah.
So,
and also, would you say that, don't be afraid to fail with an idea is also quite important?
I've watched you, Dan. Yeah. So you've built a career on it. No.
Oh, they're cutting that out. Osh.
No, I think, look, you do fail, of course, and you try and learn from that. No one sets out to fail, but you do. I don't know if it's true. Do you learn more from failure than from success?
Well, I'm not. I mean, that's what people say. I'm not sure that is true. Actually, it depends how much the failure costs you. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you're leading an organisation and there are loads of ideas, and you have to choose one, you have to show the team that sometimes you've got to go forward without the knowledge that this has happened before and that might not work, I guess. Yeah,
I mean, you learn early in your career, I suppose, that timing, you can have the right product at the wrong time.
Yep.
I've had that in my career. I've thought the product was brilliant, and it just didn't take off, and then I've left it and somebody else has taken it 2 years later and sailed off with it and done really well. So right time, right place, right product. Yeah, absolutely.
And just a couple more questions. What do you think is the most dangerous trait of a leader, or even a chief exec, or someone that's managing a team?
Thinking you know it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, your team know far more than you do. If they're trained and developed in the area, they are the experts in that area. That's not to say you don't have that gut feeling, and it's not. I always say the same thing. I always reserve the right to have the final word, but actually, our most successful products have been where other people have run with them.
Sure. And who motivates the motivator? So we've all been there, led organisations. As you said, sometimes you're hiding behind the tree having a cigarette. You don't know something's worked. How do you, if you're not in a great place, how do you galvanise yourself to?
Oh, it's not easy. As I've got older, it's just there. I mean, I get up in the morning. Why you can't see, but I've set up a whole office here where we are, and why have I done that? Why when I sit in bed on a laptop talking to you or whatever? Because I realised early on, once I started working from home, not now, but in the late 90s I started, that getting up, getting dressed, having a shave was part of my day. Yeah. And actually, all right, I'll take the dogs for a walk this afternoon, and I'll do things a bit differently. But actually, I think it's just in you that I would be very bored very quickly if I did nothing. That's me.
And can you name one or two sort of mentors or inspirational people that you've sort of drawn from?
So my boss, funny enough, I told you we're down in Norfolk, and my boss of 20 years at Selfridges was a difficult man. I've remained friends with him 20 years later, and they live up the road 20 minutes away, and I still call him boss.
Yeah.
And he was really hard on me. I remember my first report I did as a buyer, put it in an envelope, and I sent it down to his office, put it in the cubbyhole. About half an hour later, it came back, and I opened the envelope up, and he tipped it out, and it was all in pieces. I'll never forget, he ripped it up. That was my management training.
Yeah.
All right. I'm like looking at this thing that I'd spent hours on. Now, that was the way things were at that time. People were hard, but actually it didn't do me any harm. I have had to adjust.
Yeah.
Because I think life today is very difficult. Mental health, first aid was not something that he practiced. And it was hard, but he was my guiding light and taught me a huge amount of my management skills, actually.
Final question. What does Jewish mean to you, or being Jewish mean to you?
So this job has changed my life because I was not part of anything really. I was this sort of exclusion Jewish person who would try to teach me, tell my son that we need to go to shul when he knew I didn't go to shul. It was a bit of an awkward one.
Yeah.
Being Jewish means being part of the community. It's a traditional, it's a way of life. And I will tell you the last bit, which always makes me a little bit tearful. So, you know, my son Danny, and he went to New York as part of his job for 5 years. He was posted in New York, the head office. And he got there and he started to recreate the life he had here.
Yeah.
So he joined the semi-pro football team. He was a good semi-pro goalkeeper. And he was training 2 or 3 times a week and stuff. And then I said to him one day, I said, "Oh, what are you doing this weekend? And what are you going to do for Passover?" And he said, "Well, I've started going to the shul, and I'm going to synagogue. I'm going to the Seder at the synagogue." I'm like, "Really?"
Yeah.
"Really?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because they know me there."
Amazing. So he'd built that community aspect
in him.
Yeah.
Playing football in the Jewish world.
Yeah.
He knew that he could walk in somewhere with Jewish people and they would know who he was.
I think you're absolutely right. I think, you know, as you said, you go anywhere in the world and you meet someone that's Jewish and obviously you don't know them. There is that connection, isn't there? Sort of instantly.
Yeah.
And I think obviously what you've achieved, and you probably don't know this because you don't see, but obviously Maccabi allowing people to interact in that way has probably helped enormously people connect with the Jewish community that wouldn't have before. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Martin Berliner, Chief Exec of Maccabi GB. It's been an absolute pleasure. And luck for the future.